Social studies is often an if we have time subject in elementary school because it isn't generally assessed on the state tests. However, the state tests do test informational text skills. And what better way to teach nonfiction reading strategies than through topics that are culturally relevant to the world our students live in? Today, I'm going to share with you some tips that help you integrate social studies instruction into your reading block and your everyday classroom routines. Stay tuned. What's kicking, educational rock stars? Welcome back to my channel. I'm Farah from Farah Henley Education, where I strive to bring you actionable tips, strategies, and simple systems to take back into your classroom to make your teacher life a little easier. Now, if this is your first time joining me here on the channel, be sure you hit that subscribe button and click that bell so that you get notified when I go live or upload a new video here on the channel. All right, so let's start off with the fact that social studies is often an if we have time subject in elementary school because it's generally not tested on state tests. If you're in Texas, I believe it's 5th grade, maybe, when they actually test on some of the social studies stuff. But however, the state tests do test informational text. And what better way to, teach those nonfiction reading skills than through topics that are culturally relevant to the world that our students are living in. So today I'm actually going to be sharing with you some tips and strategies on how you can integrate social studies into your reading block instruction and your everyday classroom routines. Because let's face it, even though we might have a specific time on our schedule that is blocked off for social studies, it can't just be me. But oftentimes, if reading ran long or math ran long or writing instruction ran long, social studies is what kind of took the hit. In fact, that science and social studies time block that we might have had that we were supposed to be teaching those science and social studies topics, it often took a hit because we had to get RTI in, we had to get review in, maybe you had a student that was absent, and reading and math seemed to be like the big ones. So if anything ever took a hit and kind of got like pushed aside, it was social studies. I know I can't be the only one that happened to, but the fact is that you can actually integrate those social studies topics into your reading block instruction and kind of kill two birds with one stone. Because, like I said, while you're not typically going to use those social studies topics in fiction reading and fiction skills, when it comes to nonfiction and instructional texts, which we are supposed to be teaching in our classroom, this is a great time to integrate those social studies topics into that reading instruction and get some of those social studies skills in there as well. So now, the best social studies instruction will always be a balance of content instruction and reading instruction. Sometimes you want your students to really dive deep into the historical events and learn how those events transformed and influenced their current world. But other times, you may just want to use simple social studies texts to teach the nonfiction reading skills that your students need. And that is my first tip. You need to figure out a way to integrate nonfiction social studies text into your reading instruction. They may learn how to use captions, photos, charts, glossaries, and other text features to help them understand what they're reading. This approach is just one of the ways that social studies can be integrated into your reading block to make the most of that precious learning time in your classroom. And materials that are great for this are things like social studies textbooks. If you have one of those, if you have a social studies curriculum, you can use your social studies textbook for this instruction. Newspaper articles and even magazines. Do magazines still exist? I'm pretty sure they do. I see them in the checkout at the grocery store all the time. But this is just the first way and probably the most common way that social studies is kind of integrated into your reading block. Now, the second way is when you're teaching social studies is you inevitably have got to teach about historical features. Now, you can have your students research these historical figures, especially those that they're most interested in. And this can really instill a sense of pride in their culture and their heritage. This is a great way to also open up some of those conversations between students and families. You can have your students create poems, they can do short presentations, timelines to share with the class. These were always popular in my classroom during Black History Month, Hispanic Heritage Month, and Women's History Month. And I'm going to be sharing with you a couple of other tips and ways that you can do this that were really popular during those months as well. But those aren't the only times that you can do this. It could be something as simple as you're sharing a piece of history, especially if you have to teach your state's history. Maybe there's a very specific historical figure within your state, and you want to have your students research that, because let's face it, when they're researching, they're having to read and they're learning the different text features that they can use to learn how to research projects. I've done these types of research projects even down with my kindergartners. Oftentimes this was something their families were helping them with, obviously, but it is a way to kind of integrate that social studies and instruction into your reading block. Now, the third way, the third tip that you can integrate that social studies instruction and concepts into your reading block is by looking at that particular day in history, whatever day it is. Now, we're all familiar with the notifications that we get from Facebook. And am I the only one that gets those notifications from Facebook that tells me what I was doing 2, 5, 10, 15 years ago? Some of us have been on Facebook long enough to get them from quite a while back. But you get a notification that tells you what you were doing on that specific day 10 years ago, and it shows you the photos that you posted, the captions or the statuses you posted. Let me tell you, some of them I think about and go, man, I'm such a different person now. I've grown in so many ways. But that same concept can be used in your classroom. So look at the day in history, share read-alouds about whatever event happened on that day. And it doesn't have to be like this big, huge, over the top historical event. It could be just something really interesting that maybe happened on that particular day. Maybe it happened in your town, in your state, whatever. But share read-alouds about that event, newspaper articles, other media, and share what happened on that particular day in history. And then with a little pre-planning, you could assign these to your students, and then you could have them share inside your morning circles or your morning meetings or your calendar time. You could assign it to them to kind of go figure out what was happening on this day in history, and then they can come up and share that. It could be a really great addition to your morning meetings. Now, after the past few years, we have access to more technology than ever. And I'm going to suggest that you use that technology to have your students research and learn about historical events, social studies topics, and important people in history. So teaching them how to research, responsible digital citizenship, and safety online are perfect for preparing them for the real world as well. And if you're like me, I often had to teach those digital citizenship lessons during social studies. And so integrating it into my reading block when they were researching or they were reading about historical figures online was a great time to kind of teach those lessons. And I didn't have to take up other time in the class in order to do a lesson. I could integrate that into the things they were already using their technology for. So that is tip and strategy number 4. Now, the 5th strategy that I use is read-alouds. Now, read-alouds are most frequently used in lower elementary classrooms where students are in the beginning stages of reading. But don't dismiss the power of a good read aloud in upper elementary grades. And if I've got upper elementary teachers here, tell me in the comments, are you using read alouds in your classroom? My 3rd through 5th grade students loved it when I read aloud to them. And many of them actually needed to hear and see reading modeled for them. And even some of the comprehension skills that we expect them to use when they're reading, I would model them while I was reading a text, and they didn't even realize that that's what I was doing. If I'm reading a word, maybe I would miss a word on purpose and be like, wow, that's a really hard word. And I would show them how I actually handle coming to a word I don't know. And if I'm looking at that, I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. I don't understand that word. Maybe I go, I wonder how I could figure out what that word means, and I would see if they would be able to tell me, oh, look at the glossary. Does the book have a glossary? What about what sentence? Can you read that sentence again? Well, the sentence has this word in it, or it says this, so they must be referring to this. And they don't even realize that they're learning. So by you using that time to read aloud to your students, make mistakes, model some of those comprehension and reading strategies that you've been using. You can share a biography and model how some of the text features, or how you would use the text features whenever you're reading aloud, and also discuss the events in literature, because this is a great way to get that social studies content into your day, and especially during some of those down times when you maybe only have 5 or 10 minutes and you're going to do a read aloud, but integrate social studies content into that. Yes, it can be fun to have just fun read alouds. Don't get me wrong. My first graders absolutely loved Junie B. Jones, and it was often just a fun thing for me to read about Junie B. Jones, but I would also take some of this time to read about historical figures during these times as well, because I needed to get some of that social studies content in there. Now, whether you have a dedicated block just for social studies in your classroom, or you're just trying to fit it all in, the key here is that your reading instruction shouldn't focus on just fiction. Incorporating social studies skills into your non-fiction reading instruction can kill two birds with one stone. And often your students are going to sharpen key reading skills that they need to learn. Now, if you're looking for more tips, strategies, and simple systems to take back into your classroom to make your teacher life easier, check out the videos on your screen. Thanks for watching, and keep being educational rock stars.